The story of Mat Armstrong rebuilding a damaged Bugatti Chiron has quickly turned into something much bigger than just fixing a car. At first, it looked like another ambitious YouTube project, the kind that attracts attention because of the scale and difficulty involved. But very soon, it became clear that this rebuild was touching something deeper. It was not just about replacing parts or making a broken car run again. It was about control, ownership, and the relationship between car manufacturers and the people who buy their products. From the point of view of Bugatti, this situation is uncomfortable. The company has built its reputation on precision, exclusivity, and strict control over how its cars are handled, repaired, and maintained. Every Chiron is not just a car. It is a highly engineered machine that follows a very controlled life cycle. When something goes wrong, Bugatti expects that car to return to its system, where trained engineers, specialized tools, and factory-approved methods are used to bring it back to life. This system ensures quality, safety, and consistency, but it also keeps control firmly in Bugatti's hands. However, the moment an independent creator like Mat Armstrong steps in and begins rebuilding such a complex machine outside of that system, it creates a new kind of situation. It challenges the idea that only the manufacturer can handle such work. It raises questions in the minds of viewers, owners, and even other car enthusiasts. People begin to wonder if these cars are truly impossible to repair without factory involvement, or if that belief has been shaped by limited access to parts and information. This is where the tension begins. Bugatti may not openly say they want to rebuild to stop, but their lack of support and clear distance from the project sends a message. At the same time, Mat Armstrong continues forward, documenting every step, showing every challenge, and proving that progress is possible. This creates a powerful contrast. On one side, there's a global luxury brand built on control and perfection. On the other side, there is an independent builder driven by curiosity, determination, and a desire to prove that something difficult can still be done. As the rebuild moves forward, it becomes more than just a project. It becomes a symbol of a larger debate that goes beyond one car and one creator. As the rebuild continued, many expected it to fail quietly. This expectation was not random. It was based on how complex a Bugatti Chiron really is. These cars are not designed to be easily repaired outside the factory. They are built with unique engineering solutions, custom parts, and systems that are tightly integrated. When Bugatti chooses not to provide parts or support, it naturally creates a major obstacle. The idea was simple. Without official help, the rebuild would become too expensive, too complicated, and too slow to continue. Over time, the project would stop and everything would return to normal. But that is not what happened. Instead, Mat Armstrong and his team began finding ways around these problems. They removed the interior, exposed carbon fiber panels, and carefully documented each step of the process. Parts were labeled, studied, and in some cases, replaced using components that were shared within the larger Volkswagen group. This was a key moment because it showed that even a car as exclusive as a Bugatti still has connections to a broader automotive ecosystem. It also showed that knowledge and effort can sometimes replace official access. As more progress was made, the rebuild entered a more serious phase. The damage to the gearbox and the idea of splitting the car in half represented a major turning point. This is not a normal repair step. It is something that Bugatti typically handles only within its own facilities, using specialized equipment and trained engineers. Seeing this process being attempted outside the factory raised the stakes significantly. At this point, the rebuild was no longer just impressive. It became controversial. It forced people to ask difficult questions. Should such a complex machine be handled this way? Is it safe? Is it responsible? At the same time, it also inspired curiosity and excitement. Viewers were not just watching a repair. They were watching boundaries being tested. This is where Bugatti's response became more noticeable. Instead of direct confrontation, the company chose a more careful approach. Statements focused on safety, standards, and responsibility. On the surface, this seemed reasonable and professional. But beneath that, there was a clear message. Bugatti was making it known that this rebuild was not approved and that any outcome would not reflect their standards. This was not just about one car anymore. It was about protecting a brand that has spent years building its image. Another important part of this story is the role of transparency. One of the biggest differences between factory repairs and independent rebuilds is visibility. When a car goes back to Bugatti, everything happens behind closed doors. The process is controlled, private, and carefully managed. Owners trust the brand, but they rarely see the full details of what happens during a repair. In contrast, Mat Armstrong is sharing everything with the public. Every removed part, every problem, every solution is shown on camera. This level of transparency changes how people understand these cars. It removes some of the mystery that surrounds them. It shows that while they are extremely complex, they are not completely beyond understanding. This is where the rebuild becomes dangerous from a brand perspective, not because it is physically harmful, but because it changes perception. If people start to believe that independent rebuilds are possible, it could influence future decisions. Owners of damaged cars might choose different paths. They might question high repair costs or long waiting times. They might look for alternative solutions. This does not mean Bugatti is wrong in its approach. In fact, their focus on safety and quality is very important, especially for a hypercar that operates at extreme performance levels. But the existence of an alternative, even if it is difficult and risky, creates a new kind of discussion. It brings attention to the balance between control and ownership. When someone buys a car worth millions, what rights do they really have over it? Can they repair it however they choose, or are they still limited by the manufacturer's rules? These questions are not easy to answer, and they are not limited to Bugatti alone. They apply to many modern vehicles, especially as technology becomes more advanced and access to parts and software becomes more restricted. This is why the rebuild of the single Bugatti Chiron has gained so much attention. It represents a larger shift in how people think about cars, ownership, and independence. And as the project moves closer to completion, the impact of that shift may become even more clear as the rebuild pushed forward into even more complex stages. The level of risk increased in a way that could not be ignored. Working on a hypercar like the Bugatti Chiron is very different from working on a normal car. Every system is more advanced. Every part is more expensive, and every mistake carries bigger consequences. When Mat Armstrong reached a point where major structural work was required, the project entered what many would call the point of no return. This is especially true when dealing with the idea of separating major sections of the car to access internal components like the gearbox and engine. In a factory environment controlled by Bugatti, such a process is done using precise tools, detailed measurements, and highly trained specialists who understand every small detail of the car's design. Outside of that environment, everything becomes more challenging. Even with skill and experience, there is always uncertainty. This is what makes the rebuild so intense to watch. It is not just about whether the car can be fixed, but whether it can be fixed correctly, safely, and reliably. At the same time, this stage of the rebuild also highlights the determination behind the project. Instead of stopping when things became difficult, the team continued to move forward step by step. They approached each problem carefully, using research, testing, and logical thinking to find solutions. This method is very important because it shows that the rebuild is not being done carelessly. It is being done with attention and effort, even if it does not follow factory procedures. For viewers, this creates a mix of emotions. There is excitement because something rare and difficult is being attempted. There is curiosity because people want to see how problems are solved. But there is also concern because the risks are real. This balance between excitement and risk is what keeps the audience engaged. It also adds to the larger discussion about whether such rebuilds should happen at all. Some people believe that only the original manufacturer should handle repairs of this level, while others believe that ownership should give individuals the freedom to make their own decisions. As the rebuild continues, these opinions become stronger, and the project becomes a central example in this ongoing debate. At the same time, it is important to understand why Bugatti takes such a careful and controlled approach to repairs. The Chiron is not just fast. Operate at extreme levels of performance that require absolute precision. Every part of the car is designed to work together in a very specific way. If even a small detail is wrong, it could affect safety, reliability, or performance. This is why Bugatti insists on strict standards and control processes. From their perspective, it is not only about protecting the brand image, but also about protecting the people who drive these cars. A mistake in a high-performance vehicle can have serious consequences, especially at high speeds. This is something that cannot be ignored. When a company distances itself from an independent rebuild, it is also protecting itself from responsibility. If something goes wrong in a car that was not repaired under their system, they do not want to be held accountable. This is a normal and understandable position for a manufacturer. However, from the outside, it can sometimes be seen differently. To some viewers, it looks like control rather than protection. It raises questions about whether manufacturers are limiting access to parts and information in order to maintain power over repairs. This is where the discussion connects to a larger global topic often referred to as the right to repair. While this rebuild is not directly part of a legal case, it reflects the same ideas. People want to have the ability to repair and maintain the products they own, especially when they have paid a large amount of money for them. At the same time, companies want to ensure that their products are handled correctly and safely. Finding a balance between these two positions is not easy. The rebuild by Mat Armstrong brings this issue into the spotlight in a very visible way. Because everything is being shared online, it allows a wide audience to see both sides of the situation. This visibility is powerful. It turns a private repair process into a public discussion, and it invites people to form their own opinions based on what they see as the project moves closer to completion. The meaning behind it continues to grow. If the Bugatti Chiron is successfully rebuilt and able to drive again, it will represent more than just a technical achievement. It will become a symbol of what is possible outside traditional systems. For Mat Armstrong, it would be a major milestone, proving that even one of the most complex cars in the world can be brought back to life with enough effort and determination. For viewers, it would be a moment that changes perception. It would show that the limits people believed in may not be as strict as they once thought. At the same time, it would not mean that factory repairs are no longer important. Bugatti's approach would still represent the highest level of quality, safety, and precision. Instead, it would simply mean that there is more than one path. And that idea alone is powerful. It could influence how future owners think about repairs. It could encourage more transparency in the industry. It could even lead to changes in how manufacturers interact with independent builders. On the other hand, if the rebuild faces major problems or fails to meet expectations, it would also send a strong message. It would reinforce the importance of factory systems and the risks involved in going outside them. In either case, the outcome matters. That is why so many people are watching closely. This is not just entertainment. It is a real experiment happening in public with real consequences. Every step forward adds to the story, and every challenge adds to the tension. Whether the final result is success or failure, the impact of this project will likely continue long after the rebuild is complete. It has already started conversations that go far beyond one car, one creator, or one company. And as those conversations continue, they may shape the future of how people think about cars, ownership, and control in a world where technology is becoming more complex every day. Another important layer of this story is how modern technology has changed the way people learn and solve problems. In the past, rebuilding a car as complex as the Bugatti Chiron without factory support would have been almost impossible. Information was limited, tools were harder to access, and knowledge was often kept within companies. But today, things are different. With the internet, global communities, and shared knowledge, it has become easier for skilled individuals to understand systems that were once hidden. Mat Armstrong is part of this new generation of builders who combine hands-on experience with research and digital learning. This does not mean the process is easy, but it does mean that the gap between factory knowledge and independent understanding is smaller than before. Throughout the rebuild, we see this clearly. Problems that seem impossible at first are broken down into smaller steps. Each step is studied, tested, and solved with patience. This approach reflects a broader shift in how people interact with technology. Instead of accepting limitations, they explore alternatives. Instead of stopping at barriers, they look for ways around them. This mindset is one of the key reasons why the rebuild has progressed as far as it has. It also explains why so many viewers are interested. They are not just watching a car being repaired. They are watching a process of learning and discovery. It shows that complex systems can be understood with enough effort. At the same time, it is important to recognize that not everyone can do this. The level of skill, time, and resources required is still very high. This is not a simple project that anyone can copy, but it has opened the door to new possibilities. It suggests that independence and repair is not completely out of reach, even for very advanced machines. For companies like Bugatti, this shift may require a new way of thinking. Instead of complete control, there may be a future where collaboration with independent experts becomes more common. This could lead to new systems where information is shared in a controlled way, allowing safe repairs while still protecting brand standards. Whether this happens or not remains to be seen, but the rebuild is already pushing conversation in that direction. Another factor that makes the situation unique is the role of media and audience influence. In the past, a rebuild like this might have gone unnoticed outside a small group of enthusiasts. But today, platforms like YouTube allow projects to reach millions of people around the world. This gives the rebuild a level of visibility that changes everything. Every step taken by Mat Armstrong is not just a technical decision. It is also part of a public story. Viewers react, comment, and share their opinions, creating a feedback loop that shapes the narrative. This has both positive and negative effects. On one hand, it brings support, ideas, and encouragement. On the other hand, it adds pressure. Mistakes are not private. They are seen by thousands or even millions of people. This pressure can influence decisions, timelines, and expectations. It can also create a sense of competition, where each step needs to be more impressive than the last to keep the audience engaged. For a brand like Bugatti, this level of public attention can be challenging. The company is used to controlling its image carefully, presenting its cars in a very specific way. But in this situation, the story is being told by someone outside the company, in real time, without full control over the message. This creates a new kind of risk, not just technical but reputational. If the rebuild succeeds, it may influence how people view Bugatti's exclusivity and control. If it fails, it may still raise questions about why independent repair is so difficult. Either way, the narrative is no longer fully in the hands of the manufacturer. This is one of the most powerful aspects of modern media. It allows individuals to challenge large companies, not through direct conflict, but through visibility and storytelling. The rebuild becomes more than a mechanical process. It becomes a form of communication. It tells a story about possibility, limitation, and the changing relationship between creators and corporations. And because that story is shared widely, its impact becomes much greater than the project itself. As everything moves toward the final stages, there's a growing sense that the outcome will carry long-term consequences. If the Bugatti Chiron eventually returns to the road, it will stand as proof that even the most controlled and complex machines can be rebuilt outside official systems. This does not mean it will be easy, cheap, or risk-free, but it will show that it is possible. That alone could influence future decisions by car owners, especially those facing high repair costs or limited support. It may encourage more people to explore independent options, or at least to question the idea that factory repair is the only path. At the same time, it could push manufacturers like Bugatti to adapt. They may look for ways to maintain their standards while also addressing the growing demand for flexibility and transparency. This could lead to new policies, new services, or even partnerships with trusted independent specialists. On the other hand, if the rebuild faces serious issues, it could strengthen the argument for strict control. It would highlight the risks of working outside factory systems and reinforce the value of official support. In this way, both success and failure have meaning. That is what makes this story so compelling. It is not just about reaching the finish line. It is about what that finish line represents. For Mat Armstrong, it is a test of skill and determination. For Bugatti, it is a moment that challenges long-standing practices. For viewers, it is an opportunity to see a real-world example of a much larger issue. As the final steps approach, the tension continues to build. Every detail matters. Every decision carries weight, and every update brings the story closer to its conclusion. No matter how it ends, the rebuild has already achieved something important. It has started a conversation that goes beyond cars, beyond brands, and beyond individual projects. It has shown that in a world of advanced technology and strong corporate control, there is still room for curiosity, effort, and independent thinking to make a difference as the rebuild reaches its final and most critical moments. Everything begins to come together in a way that feels both exciting and uncertain. What started as a damaged Bugatti Chiron sitting with no clear future has now turned into one of the most watched automotive projects in recent time. Step by step, Mat Armstrong and his team have taken on challenges that many believe were impossible outside of a factory environment. From removing complex carbon fiber panels to working through mechanical systems that are usually hidden behind strict manufacturer control, every stage is added to the story. Now, as the final pieces are being prepared, the focus shifts from possibility to proof. It is one thing to take apart and rebuild such a machine, but it is another to make it function as intended. The moment the car attempts to move under its own power again will be the true test. This is where all the effort, all the decisions, and all the risks come together. For viewers, this moment carries a strong sense of anticipation. It is the point where questions finally meet answers. Will the car perform correctly? Will it be reliable? Will it match expectations? Or will hidden issues appear? These are not simple questions, and the answers will shape how the entire project is remembered. At the same time, this moment also carries symbolic meaning. If the car drives successfully, it will represent more than just mechanical success. It will show that determination and skill can challenge even the most controlled systems. It will show that limits are not always as fixed as they seem. But if problems arise, it will also serve as a reminder of why those systems exist in the first place. In either case, the outcome will not be ignored. It will be discussed, analyzed, and remembered by both enthusiasts and professionals. Looking beyond the immediate result, the long-term impact of this rebuild may be even more important than the final outcome itself. For Bugatti, this project represents a moment where their traditional approach is being questioned in a very public way. The company's focus on control, quality, and safety has always been part of its identity. That identity is not likely to change overnight, and for good reason. High-performance vehicles require careful handling, and maintaining strict standards is essential for protecting both the brand and its customers. However, the visibility of this rebuild introduces a new factor that cannot be ignored. It shows that there's interest in alternative approaches, and that people are willing to explore those options when given a chance. This does not mean that Bugatti's methods are wrong, but it does suggest that there may be room for evolution. Perhaps in the future, manufacturers will consider